Tell us about this journey, because you wrote a book on the human cloud, on how basically Changemakers, and I'd love to hear who you consider Changemakers.
Sure.
Are using AI and the freelance economy to transform work and I guess the workplace. How do you explain this history, and when did it start? And just give us a short sort of historical timeline here.
First off, the book for me was my own freelance experience. So a quick genesis of how the book came to be was I've been dabbling in freelancing really as a way to scratch my creative itches. So it's more about, I'm a corporate executive now. I certainly don't want for things in the traditional sense, but what I do look for is ability to do things like creative writing, talking as a thought leader, as an expert in these various topics. And so I actually did a freelance project with someone where I helped them write a report on the state of AI. And that happened to be my eventual co-author. So we met, I supported him, did some ghostwriting for him. That sort of blossomed into a friendship. And then he said, well, why don't we write a book? Because I've got one, it's pretty much already done, were his famous last words. It was nowhere near done, but we got together, started pitching to publishers, and ultimately landed with HarperCollins, which we've been thrilled about. But from it was my experience sort of tasting what freelance is like. I've learned a lot over the last couple of years from him. He is more of a freelance expert, has really been foundational in building the systems around how freelancers work in an enterprise. For me, I think when I think about this, right, and you think about a change maker, really what that means is just someone that is focused on delivering value. That's their metric. That's what they do to make their mark in the world, to be successful, to drive a business. And that hasn't changed, right? Think about my success in my corporate career has largely been because that's been my focus. That's been my area of expertise, is growing value within organizations and businesses and demonstrating that. And that begets the next role and the next role. That's the same that, freelancers aren't new, and solo practitioners, whatever you would like to call them, people that sort of hung out their shingle over the past several decades, the same concept. But what is different, and this is really our central conceit, right, is that what is different now is that the tools that you have at your disposal, whether you're a corporation or a freelancer, to be effective and to generate that 10x value that you're looking for, there's so much more you can work with now than there was 20, 30 years ago. And that's,
I think that's interesting, right? Because I was looking into this actually in many ways, but in my PhD a long time ago. And, if you go more than 10 years back, if you go 20 years back, there was also this moment, around the first internet craze where everybody said, this is coming now, right? And there were books about the freelance economy, all of that stuff. And yes, there was freelancing, but that kind of freelancing was the odd job, and it was like writing. What you're talking about, and please explain, but you're talking about deeper and higher level and higher hierarchical type of knowledge, which are making bigger and bigger impacts in corporations. You're not saying, well, you were using an example before, hiring an executive, which is something you would not really think of even back in 99 when I was writing about these things. No one was truly saying. They were saying, actually, but they didn't really believe it, which is what I found out. They didn't really believe that you could sit on an island. You could maybe somewhat run the company, but you certainly couldn't get a job as a C-level executive,
right?
Fresh off the boat from some other company. You can't convince people that I'm going to sit on this island and do this job.
Right.
So what has changed?
What has changed? Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I think when we used to think about freelancing, and I used to think about freelancing back in the early 2000s, it was, I'm going to get someone to build a website, or to get someone to design a logo for me, these types of activities. And now we're seeing accountants, lawyers, executives, very, very high echelon type of work being brought in as freelancers and supporting a career as a freelancer. One of the things we talk about that I think fundamentally changed, take technology and all the other stuff off the plate. We talk about something called portable merit, meaning it used to be that your credentials were your resume. It was a title of a company. It was your longevity there and your role, and not much else. Maybe your network, maybe people that knew you and could vouch for you. Now, with this notion of sort of social media, a professional brand, portfolios, more and more people are having basically that stamp of here's what I've done, be very visible in the world and very obvious. You've got peer reviews coming in, people complimenting your work, writing recommendations on a LinkedIn or Upwork. So all of this is giving the ability to walk into a new role with a list of accomplishments that's real and tangible, and people can, it's that building that trust, right? It's that trust relationship that you're walking in with that was so hard to do when it was geographically isolated and sort of individual networks.
So that could be many things. It's content, but it could also be software. I mean, on GitHub, you could theoretically have, your code base, basically, which
that's right.
Yeah,
and designers, we see designers having live portfolios that are very interactive. That was hard to do when, it took a long time, or you had to be a web developer to stand something like that up. So it's that barrier to entry, that lessening of friction for that type is just one example, right? And then there's obviously technology platforms and corporate mores and things like that have evolved as well.
So let's deepen this focus more on the enablers, because there surely are still some limitations, which we'll cover a little bit as well. And I know you care about both. But in terms of these enablers, so the technological part, I guess in a loose sense, we have covered already. So, but what is that? What is that? Is it the cloud more generally? The fact that there are these computing platforms where you can host your work, your content, I guess the resume platforms, most famously LinkedIn, I guess, but also many, many other more niche places where designers congregate and do more than just hang on social media. They actually share their professional lives and lasting things that they have created. Which of these things, was available even just 10 years ago that matters today? I guess if you go to kind of resume platforms, there were several of them, even just 10, 15 years ago, but their importance has taken on a new meaning now. What are some of the other types of software you would put into kind of this necessary category to really have what we have today with the freelance economy?
Yeah, the branding aspect is a key one, right? That's our virtual resume to get in the door. But what I have found that's really helped is the variety and sophistication of tools that help with collaboration. And I don't mean to use such a trite, sort of overly generic term. But what I mean specifically is, 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to work with someone that was outside of your organization, it was basically email, maybe Dropbox, a few other techniques like that, but nothing that was really, I call it sophisticated. And today we have all the tools that we're using day in and day out, being a virtual world now, Zoom and Google Docs and Drive and Teams and Slack and you name it, right? And that it means something, having been in multiple organizations where we either had those tools or not. The level of flexibility of work, particularly as we start pivoting more toward project-based and episodic work, as opposed to just coming in and doing the same role day in and day out. The more we do that kind of work, the real need for teams to come together and share is critical. And again, 15 years ago, it was actually really hard to do. Just tactically, it was difficult to get basic work done.
Yeah, and there's two things here, though, because you talk about it as the freelance economy, but of course, the larger discussion which COVID has brought is everyone, in a sense, is a freelancer to their own company now, in the sense that, the tools you're using as a regular employee trying to work virtually are fairly similar to what a freelancer, slightly less so. Perhaps there were some systems that a freelancer will not have access to today. But largely, those are the gating challenges and the sort of the cybersecurity challenges of companies these days. They're not foundational challenges.